Hello. Um, Again, I got so many books. I really was not going to have much time in the video. You'll be like full of interruptions, so I thought of doing another one of these. I have a lot. A lot of books. So yeah. I'll just start with the ones that I haven't read. I think this one I would prefer the ones that I like, volume 1, 2, 3, whatever. Those I would like to just read them all in one take, kind of to have the full story. So yeah, a few of them I'm going to skip, but these ones that are the one I can read, the ones that I can like, the ones that are completed in one book, those ones I'm going to read. Okay, so first one, Aki's Sweet Mother. So you wish to summon the Dark Brotherhood. You wish to see someone dead. Pray, child, pray, and let the Night Mother hear your plea. You must perform that most profane of rituals, the Black Sacrament. Create an effigy of the intended victim, assembled from actual body parts, including a heart, skull, bones, and flesh. Encircle that effigy with candles. The ritual itself must then commence. Proceed to stab the effigy repeatedly with a dagger rubbed with the petals of a nightshade plant, while whispering this plea: sweet mother, send your child unto me, for the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. Then wait, child, for the dread Father Cephas rewards the patient. If you will be visited by a representative of the Dark Brotherhood. So begins a contract bond in blood. That's a really good one. I knew that one was going to be the Dark Brotherhood. It's a really good questline. I really enjoy it. Mostly because I generally go stealth, and the light armor that they give you is really good. Also, the horse, Shadowmare, was it? It's really good. I plan to do that questline, but for now, I haven't gotten to it. Okay, so Ahzidal's Descent by Halunde Greycloak. Okay. In the days beyond memory, when men first walked the lands of Skyrim, there arose in the city of Sarthal a great enchanter. As a boy, his gift for magic and artifice had been evident to his tutors. As a man, his skill surpassed them all, and finding nothing more to learn among his kin, he left wife and child and set out to train under the elven masters. A year became 2, then 3, and when finally his path led him back to Sarthal, he found only ruins, for the elves had sacked the city, and all that lived there was dead or gone. Amid the ashes, in the smoldering ruins of his home, he swore a terrible oath of vengeance, and from that comes the name of legends give him, Ahzidal, the embittered destroyer. Alone, he could do nothing, and so he bided his time, delving deeper into his art than any before him. From the Dwemer, he learned the 7 natures of metal and how to harmonize them. From Aelith, the ancient runes and drawn magic even the elves had begun to forget. Among Fulmer and Chimer and Altmer he travelled, taking what he could from each, and all the while plotting how he might turn that knowledge against them. Finally, word reached him of Ysgramor and his companions, newly arrived from Atmora. For 3 days and nights he rode north, and met them as they made landfall on the city coast near the ruins of Sarthal, which the elves had fortified against them. He offered the companions his service, and all he had produced in his years of labor, and with Atmoran still imbued with his enchantments, the elves fell before them, and at last he had his revenge. For he was not content. His craft has become his life, and his hunger for knowledge still gnawed at him, driving him to delve even deeper. At long last, he exhausted the lore of the elves, but it was not enough. He sought the secrets of dragon runes, and won for himself a seat among the high priests, but it was not enough. and at length he turned his gaze to the plains of oblivion and found there both power and madness. Some say he ventured there, never to return. Others that he was betrayed by his fellow dragon priest and killed, or driven into hiding, in the ruins beneath his beloved Sarthal, among the skull of Solstheim. It is said he fled to their island, and was sealed in the depths of Kolbjorn Balro, together with his last of his relics. But that is the tale, as it was told among the bards of Winterhold. Whatever the truth, the legend of Ahzidal was indeed intended as a warning. In pursuit of perfection, one must take care that the pursuit itself does not become all-consuming. Kolbjorn Barrow. Wait. What skull? Yeah. I knew we were there. Okay, so that's Ahzidal's Descent, Arcana Restored. A Handybook by Wapna Neustra, Praeceptor Emeritus. This one has actually two authors. Interesting. From the Form. Okay. Form the first. Mark as though the mana fountain to be primed with pure gold. For from pure gold only may the humors be rectified, and the pure principles coaxed from the chaos of pure power. Droppest thou then the pure gold upon the surface of the mana fountain. Takest thou exceeding great care to safeguard yourself from the insalubrious tempest of the mana fountain, for through such assaults may one's health be utterly blighted. Okay, this is going to be written really weirdly. I need to prepare for that. Okay, Form the second. Make sure that thou harvest with you this excellent manual, so that thou mayst speak the necessary words straight away, and without error, so that thou not in carelessness cause thyself and much else to discorporate and disorder the world with your component humors. Form the third. Take in hand the item to be restored, and hold it forth within the primed fountain, murmuring all the while the appropriate phrases, which are to be learned most expeditiously and faultlessly from this manual, and this manual alone, notwithstanding the vile calumnies of Carneson and Rator, whose bowels are consumed of envy of my great learning, and who do falsely give testament to the efficacies of their own manuals, which are in very way inferior and stepped in error. Form the fourth. Proceed instantly to heal thyself of all injuries, or to avail yourself of the healing powers of the temples and healers. For though the agonies of mana cost must be borne by any who would restore a prize arcana to full potency, yet it is not wise that suffering be endured unduly, nor does the suffering in any way render the potency more sublime. Notwithstanding the foolish speculations of Carneson and Rator, whose faults and wickedness are manifest even to the least learned of critics. Okay. This one no, this one you don't let me, this one is not a book, this one I already read. Okay, Dragon Language, Myth No More. By Hela Trice Burst. Dragon, the very word conjures nightmares, images of shadow skies, hideous roaring, and endless fire. Indeed, the dragons were terrifying beasts that were once as numerous as they were deadly, but what most Norse don't realize is that the dragons were in fact not simple, mindless beasts. Indeed, they were a thriving, intelligent culture, one bent on the elimination or enslavement of any non-dragon civilization in the entire world. It therefore stands to reason that the dragons will require a way to communicate with one another. That they would need to speak, and through much research, scholars have determined that this is exactly what the dragons did. For the mighty roars of the beasts, even when those roars contained fire or ice or some other deadly magic, were actually much more. They were words. Words in ancient, though decipherable tongue. Nonsense, you say. Sheer folly on the part of some over-eager academics. I thought precisely the same thing, but then I started hearing rumors, the odd snippet of a conversation from some brave explorer or gold-coveting crypt diver. And always, it was the same word repeated. Wall. So I listened more. I began to arrange the pieces of the puzzle, and slowly unraveled the mystery. Spread throughout Skyrim, in ancient dungeons, burial grounds, and other secluded places, there are walls. Black, ominous walls on which is written a script, so old, so unknown, none who had encountered it could even begin its translation. In my heart, I came to know the truth. This was proof of the ancient dragon language. For what else could it possibly be? It only made sense that these walls were constructed by the ancient Norse who had lived in the time of the dragons, and out of fear or respect, had somehow learned and used the language of the ancient beasts. But at that point, all I had was my own gut instinct. What I needed was proof. Thus began the adventure of my life, one spanning 17 months, and the death of 3 courageous guides and 2 sellswords protectors. But I chose not to dwell on those grim details, for the end result was so glorious it made any hardship worth it. In my travels, I found many of the ancient walls, and every suspicion proved true. It did in fact appear as if the ancient Norse had copied the language of the dragons of old, for the characters of that language very much resemble claw marks or scratches. One can almost envision a majestic dragon using his great sharp talons to grave the symbols into the stone itself, and a human witness, possibly even a thrall or servant, learning, observing, so that he too could use the language for his own ends. But as I observed the walls I noticed something peculiar about some of the words. It was as if they pulsed with a kind of power and unknown energy that, if unlocked, might be harnessed by the reader. That sounds like nonsense, I know, but if you had stood by these walls, seen their blackness, felt their power, you would understand that of which I speak. Thankfully, although entranced, I was able to retain enough sense to actually transcribe the characters I saw, and in doing so, I began to see patterns in the language, patterns that allowed me to decipher what it was I was reading. For example, I transcribed the following passage. Assigning those scratchings to actual Tamrielic language characters, I further translated what I saw into this. Okay. So, Hetnok, Ingnavarkaf, Hodab, Mutrei, Yamuron, Afrotokrosis, Nus Sinon, Tinok, Ark Dukan, which translates into the Tamrielic as follows. Here lies Yngvar Ghost Bear, who did seek glory on the battlefield of sorrows, but instead found death and dishonor. Then, in another crypt, I encountered this wall with this transcription, which translates into Etnok Kopran do Iglif Lysos, Mogrind Okovlan Inkomorke Moroke, Ukain Nus Ats Unax Halvut Du Liv Krasar. I am kind of I'm sorry. But the first thing says crosses and the other one says Moroke, which makes me remember those are kind of the names of the ones with the masks. For now we have Bokun, Crossis, the other one that I don't remember the name, but it was the last one, started with a Z, like a Z. And Muroke. Muroke is another one, right? I think it is. Sorry. I just remember that and kind of caught my attention. Which ultimately translates into the Tamrielic as: here lies the body of Inglyph Iceblood, who met his end not in glorious combat, but at the cruel touch of the withering sickness. And there you see the pattern, he repeated, words, here lies, which could only mean one thing. Those walls marked actual ancient North burial grounds. You can imagine my nearly uncontainable excitement. It all stated to make sense. The ancient North used to be dragon language for these walls for very specific reasons. One of them was obviously to mark the grave of some important figure. But what else? Were they all graves, or did they serve another purpose as well? I set off to find out. It was well rewarded for my efforts. Here's what I discovered. This passage translates into this: Hetma tahrodis tafir skorji lunsinag wen klov kove nal rinik hakun roktovad wagarot, which in Tamrielic translates into this: here fell the treacherous thief Skorji Leech Fingers, whose head was removed by the very axe he was attempting to steal. So here we see a wall that marks the spot where some significant ancient Nord died, with this passage translated into this: Quetzegol Barukiv Danik Valil Kierdo Gravun Brado Wobovul Mo Komar Nol Kison Sakri Tu Korosik Hokoron, which in Tamrielic translates into: this stone commemorates the doom elf children of the... What happened there? Is that just my game? Yeah. Commemorates the doom elf children of the autumn field who fled in terror from the sharp swords of the ancient enemy. This wall seems to commemorate some ancient long forgotten event in Tamrielic history. Whether that event occurred on or near the place where the wall was erected, we will probably never know. And finally, this passage, which translates into: Aesa walan ketsegal brinahi varukt tohild fintor wen smulin agfrin ol sako heim, which in Tamrielic translates to this: Aesa raised these stones for her sister, Tohild, the Inferno, whose passion burned hot as the red forge. This wall, and I encountered quite a few like this, was obviously commissioned or built by a specific person to honor someone important to them. What was the significance of the location? Was it important to the person who died, or is it the actual location of that person's death? Again, those answers are probably lost to time and will never be known. And so you see, the ancient dragon language is indeed myth no more. It existed, but better yet, it still exists, and probably will until the end of time, thanks to the ancient Nords and their constructions of these many walls. But don't take my word for it, for the walls are there for the discovering in Skyrim's dangerous secret places. They serve as a bridge between the realm of the ancient North and our own. The dragons may never return to our world, but now we can return to theirs, and someday, we may even unlock the strange unknown power hidden in their words. Okay, so that's kind of like when people started discovering the walls. I butchered the pronunciation there. I'm completely conscious of it. I have no regrets. Too many weird words there. Too many of them. Now to take a drink. Dwarves. That's a volume 2. Dwemer history and culture. And the trivialization of the Dwemer in popular. Did I read this? It reminds of the staples of literature. I don't think I have. So, collected essays on Dwemer history and culture, chapter 1. Oh, wait, that's a chapter? Wait. Now that last looks like something less than one book. Marobal Sul and the Trivialization of the Dwemer in Popular Culture by Haspat and Tapolis. While Marobal Sul's Asian Tales. Oh, and another thing. Last time we were reading a book that I think it was about. It was written by Marobal Sul, and then there was like a translator's note that actually says that Marobal Sul is a pseudonym, and that there was no one actually in the college with a name, which was very interesting. That the authors have and translators have a little bit of a beef with each other. I know, don't do that. Well, Marobal Sul's Ancient Tales of the Dwemer was definitely debunked in scholarly circles as early as the reign of Kataria. First, it remains one of the staples of the literate middle classes of the empire and has served to set the image of the Dwemer in the popular imagination of generations of school children. What about this lengthy but curiously insubstantial tome has proved so captivating to the public that it has been able to see off both the scorn of the literati and the scathing critiques of the scholars? Before examining this question, a brief summary of the provenance and subsequent career of Ancient Tales would be appropriate. First published around Second Era 600, year 670 in the interregnum between fall of the First Citadelic Empire and the rise of Tarver Septim. It was originally presented as a serious scholarly work based on research on the archives of the University of Guilin, and was, in the chaos of that era, was taken at face value, a sign of the sad state of Dwemer scholarship in those years. Little is known of the author, but Marobal Sul was most likely a pseudonym of Gorfelim, a prolific writer of penny dreadful romances of that era, who is known to have used many other pseudonyms. While most of Felim's other work has, thankfully, been lost to history, what little survives matches Ancient Tales in both language and tone. See Lomi's textual comparison of Gorfelim's A Hypothetical Treasury with Marobal Sul's Ancient Tales of the Dwemer. Hypothetical Treachery. That one we did read. Felim lived in Cyrodiil his whole life, writing light entertainment for the elite of the old imperial capital. Why he decided to turn his hand to the Dwemer is unknown, but it is clear that his research consisted of nothing more than collecting the peasants' tales of the Nivene Valley and recasting them in the Dwemer guise. The book proved popular in Cyrodiil, and Felim continued to churn out more volumes until the series numbered 7 in all. Okay, number 7 in all. Ancient Tales of the Dwemer was thus firmly established as a local favorite in Cyrodiil, already in its 17th printing, when the historical forces that propelled Tarver Septim to prominence also began to spread the literature of the Heartland across the continent. Marobal Sul's version of the Dwemer was seized upon in a surge of human racial nationalism that has not yet subsided. The Dwemer appear in these tales as creatures of the fable and light fantasy, but in general they are just like us. They come across as a bit eccentric, perhaps, but certainly there is nothing fearsome or dangerous about them. Compare these to the Dwemer of early Redguard legend, a mysterious, powerful race, capable of bending the very laws of nature to their will, vanished, but perhaps not gone. For the Dwemer portrayed in the most ancient Norse sagas, fearsome warriors tainted by blasphemous religion practice. who used their profane mechanism to drive the Nords from Morrowind. Morobarsul's Dwemer were much more amendable to the spirit of the time, which saw humans as the pinnacle of creation, and the other races and enlightened barbarians were imperfect lesser versions of humans eager for tutelage. Ancient tales falls firmly in the later camp, which does much to explain its enduring hold on the popular imagination. Morobarsul's Dwemer are so much more comfortable, so much more friendlier, so much more familiar than the real Dwemer, whose truly mysterious nature we are only beginning to understand. The public refers to light, trivial versions of this vanished race, and from what I have learned in my years of study on the Dwemer, I have some sympathy for their presence, as the following essays will show the Dwemer were, to our modern eyes, a remarkably unlikable people in many ways. Yep. They were talking about Morobarsul. He kind of fucked up on that. They are going to be not the most respectful when talking about him. He kind of did a lot of damage with that, with how he portrayed the Dwemer on his works. This is a volume 1, this is a volume 3. Harbane's Bestiary, Ice Wraith. Yes. No author here? Oh, but Harbane's Bestiary. Okay. 17th. Last Seed. When winter's chill descended upon me as I traveled further north through the frozen plains and mountains, I settled in at the inn at Dawnstar for a moment of respite and a warm meal. Another traveler there told me to be cautious, that there are creatures who settle into the powder white of the snow with nary a clue to the careless, until it is too late. He went on and on, with wild gestures and fantastic tales of entire merchant expeditions being killed by these beasts. His stories frightened the other inn patrons, but I will not be turned by a coward's tale. I'll see this for my own eyes. For these icy caves and snow-capped peaks of the north are exactly the type of places that call to an adventurer like me. It did not take me long to find what I sought. These ice wraiths are lucid, serpentine creatures of magic, as if conjured from the frozen tundra and glaciers of Skyrim itself. At one with an environment that makes them nearly invisible, these ethereal apparitions are the death of many Nords, if not their sudden unholy strike that casts their entire body through their target, then by the malady of Whitebane, a curse of infection that dulls the intellect and makes the target even more the victim. As deadly as they are, Ice Wraith are simple-minded in their determination, and combat is a straightforward affair, and brute force and a sharp blade are enough to fell these savage creatures. Only the hardiest of men would hope to survive just one of these beasts, but I have slain two with general ease. It's good that I have found that I make a decent coin selling the Ice Wraith teeth, as they are prized ingredient in alchemical potions. That will continue to afford me the opportunity to search these lands for a challenge worthy of story, for I have yet to see what will make me tremble. Interesting. Is there more Harbane's Bestiary? That would actually be really nice to have a lot of entries. This is a journal, this is a journal, this is a letter. I'll get to you at some point. Licanthropic Legends of Skyrim by Lentulus Inventius, Order of the Horn. I had heard the same rumors as everyone else, that the province of Skyrim was awash in various forms of lycanthropy. I had studied the werewolves for some time, and was keen to see if these rumors were where bears were actually sustained. I elected to pursue these studies in the warmer summer months in deference to my fragile constitution. One quickly finds that common villagers are of practically no use in this land, whereas in Cyrodiil, even the youngest child can tell you the true fauna that inhabit its environments. Here I found alleged wise men recounting tales of unicorns and flying horses directly alongside their stories of werebears, so I don't put any stock in these rumors. They certainly have their traditions for warding off werebears, certain plans and ceremonies, but nobody can attest to even having seen one firsthand, much less possess any sort of artifact. Everyone has a cousin or a friend who saw one once, but when pressed, these stories fall apart. I don't wish to completely discount these stories, but I also must conclude that they may have spun out of some wild retelling of a particularly vicious but mundane bear. Legends can take a life of their own, particularly when there are grains of truth, as here we have the very real threat of werewolves. I worry that by spreading stories of a potentially false, or at least rare beast, people may begin to discount the threat that real beasts pose. But if Skyrim's people chose to lead a backwards life, shrieking at shadows and clouds, I will not stop them. The werewolves in this land are a curious sort, at least the legends of them, given the North flair of for bravado. I don't I don't know how you say that. I had expected to see werewolf belts lining walls in the cities, werewolves' heads on pikes, that sort of gaudy show. Instead, few people in civilized society ever mentioned them, and my questions were usually met with nervous stares. Thinking that perhaps the common folk were simply more cowardly than I had been led to believe in my Nordic acquaintances in Cyrodiil, I sought out those known for actual bravery, the supposedly fearless warriors, bands of Whiterun, the companions, lost all color when I broached the subject and asked me to leave. I had thought better of them, and was disappointed at how quickly brave men and women can be intimidated by stories. Pressing into the wilderness, away from any sort of settlement, I would often find hunters, willing to recount stories of their skills. It was finally through one of them, a certain Karsten Hammerback, that I heard my first, and unfortunately only, verifiable stories of werewolves in the province, accompanied by pelts and claws to prove the killing. Just as I was thrilling to find some actual evidence of the local beasts, he got a wild, conspirational look in his eyes and began spinning tales of some band of werewolf hunters and their exploits in hunting down the creatures. I left him to mop his droll and continued my journeys. In the end, I regret that my trip to Skyrim did not prove more productive. If it's indeed true that their breeds of lycanthropes are distinct from and more powerful than our local ones, they could prove to be powerful allies in our conflict against the influx of werevultures in wait. Werevultures? That's the first time I read that word. How does that work? I'll need to see that. Okay. If they have grown as great and terrible as my friend Gaelian asserts, they could soon threaten the interior of Tamriel. When the summer next crests, I plan to travel there for a better accounting of the winged cretins, so that I may make more fitting report on the council. Interesting. Where vultures? That's kind of interesting. Ode to the Tundrastraiders. Also, I didn't really delve that much into werewolves and lycanthropy in Skyrim before, so I don't really know how it works. But I think I have found way more vampires than werewolves. Also, why would they be so scared of werewolves? They're not that common. At least I haven't found anything. I have been finding vampires here and there. But werewolves? None. Nothing. I don't know. So yeah. Okay. So. Ode to the Tundrastraiders. That's the no? Oh, mighty Tundrastrider. Have you and your mighty tusked beast silhouette against the great orange expanse? Thundering footsteps herald your herd. Man and beast a blazing trail together. One in nature, each relying upon the other, more than just man and beast, but equals who need one another to survive. How I long to run across the tundra in their mighty wake. That would truly be my greatest honor. The morning would be spent gathering dyes to paint our mammoths, and then carve the fiercest images into their tusks. Okay. When it would be time for the skeever hunt, our clubs would rain down upon the rat pests, smashing the life out of them. In the evening, could sit around the campfire, and I would regale those nearby with songs of their majesty and grace. They would let me sample the mammoth's cheese, a food so foul, yet with healing properties so great. We would snack on the roasted skeever we would freshly caught that day before laying under the stars to sleep. A slowly fade to dream nested in a radiating heat of mammoth fur, cold-resistant properties keeping me snug. What a grand time we would have, and no. Interesting. Of Fjori and Holgeir. No author. In her 29th summer of life, Fjori, the huntress, met the warlord Holgeir on the field of battle. None remember what they fought over, for their love to come was so great it overshadowed all rivalries and disputes. They fought to a standstill, as their followers looked on. Till her sword broke, his axe and his shield dulled her blade, and all could see that they were equals. As the eel finds his mates, so too did Fjori find hers in Holgeir. And a time of peace came to the clans of the forest. But as the summer's warmth gives way to winter's chill, so too would this peace pass. But the snake came and bit Holgeir, its venom seeping deep into the wounds. A wail greeted Fjori's view as she came over the snow-covered mountains to the coast. She obtained an elixir from the Akavir who returned to the forest in haste. Through Holgeir could smell the winds of Sovngarde. She gave him the elixir, and he was cured in an instant, but the snake bit Fjori as she poured the last drop into Holgeir's mouth, and fatigued from her journey, she joined the ancestors immediately. Holgeir's grief was such that he built a tomb, and upon completion took his own life that he might rejoin her. Ah, was pretty sad. She did everything. Then what was the snake like? A literal one, or was it the representation of someone trying to kill them? Would be interesting if that was the case. Is there another entry for that one? The Apprentice Assistant. Advice from Valenwood's most prestigious spellcaster. Did I read this? No, I don't think so. Okay. No doubt you have heard tales of my adventures, stories carried from province to province, all of Tamriel in awe of my feats of magical prowess. More than once I am sure you have thought, if only I had Aramil's ability, then I too could seek fame and fortune in magic duels. It is true, of course, great fame and limitless fortune await those who are successful. But to be successful, one needs to learn from the best. That is why you have purchased this book, so that I may teach you. I am, of course, the best. Here, then, it is my advice. Follow it and you too can make a name for yourself throughout Tamriel. 1. To know your opponent is to know his weakness. Infinitely more versatile than a simple blade of steel, a good mage has a wide array of spells at her disposal. More than that, she knows when to best use them. She knows that frost spells can stop a charging beast or keep a savage brute from swinging his sword. She knows that shock spells can drain her opponent's magicka. She knows that illusion spells can set a group of enemies against each other, should she find herself in a less than fair fight, and all to come a reality when her opponents know they cannot win in single combat, and that there are spells that can save her in a moment when all seems lost. 2. To know yourself is to know your limits. Even the best mage has a finite reserve of magicka. None born yet have been graced with Magnus' infinite reserves of power, and so a good mage does not overextend herself. She makes sure she always had enough magicka to keep herself safe. Failing that, she makes sure she has a sizable supply of potions at the ready. Failing that, she makes sure she always has an escape route. Not that the great Aramril has ever fled a fight, but of course you do not necessarily share her superb natural ability. That is why you must practice. 3. Words can kill you. There is no question that words are an essential tool of aspiring mage. They can block incoming spells, negate your opponent's attack, and wasting his magicka. A good mage knows, however, to not rely too heavily on her ward. Keeping a ward ready for too long will leave a caster drained of magicka, unable to retaliate, and at worst unable to maintain the ward and therefore completely defenseless. 2 hands are not always better than 1. Okay, 4. 2 hands are not always better than 1. Any advanced spellcaster has learned to cast spells with both hands, dealing more damage. There are certainly times when this is to your advantage, such as when an opponent is already weakened, or when it is likely to draw a bigger reaction from the crowd that has no doubt gathered to watch you. It is not always the best strategy, however. Concentration spells, for example, can often be used on the ground when an opponent is especially nimble. In that instance, using both hands independently can cover more ground at the same time. A mage throwing fireballs with both hands cannot immediately raise a ward to defend herself, or heal while she continues to attack. Always rise to the challenge, especially when you know you can win. Remember that your first priority is, of course, to stay alive. Following closely behind, though, it is your need to please the crowd. You are, after all, depending on their generosity to fund your adventures. Here, then, more than magic comes into play. If you can gain a sense of your opponent's ability before the duel begins, you can enter into the event with confidence, knowing that you outclass your opponent is of great importance. It means you can confidently give the crowd a better show. Likewise, knowing ahead of time that you could very well lose a duel, you are afforded that opportunity to suddenly find yourself engaged elsewhere and be unable to attend the event. By no means do I suggest that I have ever done such a thing. I simply find that my great fame occasionally means I am unable to respond to every single request for a duel. Keep these few things in mind. Keep your wits about you, and you too can make a name for yourself by putting on great displays of magical prowess. Take care, though, for if you become successful enough, you may find yourself facing a challenge from me. A little bit of pride and egocentric this person is, but pretty solid advice, honestly. Okay, so the Bear of Markarth, The Crimes of Ulfric Stormcloak by Arrhenius Arius, Imperial Scholar. So this is going to be a very, very biased book. Ulfric Stormcloak is considered a hero by many for his part in quelling the Forsworn uprising. It is said that when the Empire abandoned Skyrim and the natives of the Reach rebelled, undoubtedly due to the Nords' poor treatment of them, Ulfric Stormcloak and his militia was there to retake their land from the Forsworn. In all the bravado and epic yarns, the skulls composed of his exploits, you will think Ulfric to be a giant of a man, equal to that of Tyr Septim in his gunning leadership and decisive actions, but the truth is far more revealing. Yes, from the 4th era, year 174 to year 177, the Forsworn did in fact rule over the Reach as an independent kingdom from Skyrim. Yes, this was accomplished while the Empire was beset by the Aldmeri Dominion forces and could not send a legion to reestablish order. And yes, Ulfric Stormcloak did quell the rebellion without imperial assistance. That much is true. But what the bards often fail to tell in their stories is that the Forsworn kingdom was quite peaceful for those 2 years they were in power. True, some crimes were committed against former Nord landowners, often those accused of being the harshest towards their native workers, but on the whole the Forsworn ruled their lands fairly and were making overtures to be recognized by the Empire as a legitimate kingdom. In the wake of the aftermath of the Great War, you can imagine the backlog on stately matters of the Empire had. Before a peace treaty could be resolved with the Forsworn, a militia led by Ulfric Stormcloak sieged the gates of their capital, Markarth. That happened during the battle was war. But what happened after the battle was over is nothing short of war crimes. Every official who worked for the Forsworn was put to the sword, even after they had surrendered. Native women were tortured to give up names of Forsworn fighters who had fled the city or were in the hills of the Reach. Anyone who lived in the city, Forsworn nor the like, were executed if they had not fought with Ulfric and his men when they breached the gates. "You are with us, or you are against Skyrim," was the message on Ulfric's lips as he ordered the death of shopkeepers, farmers, the elderly, and any child old enough to lift a sword that had failed in the call to fight with him. So when a grateful empire accepted Ulfric's victory and sent soldiers to re-establish the rule of law in the Reach, it was no surprise that he would demand to be allowed to worship Talos freely before the Legion could enter. With chaos running through the streets of Markarth and the reports of death rising every day, the Empire had no choice but to grant Ulfric and his men their worship. We allowed them to worship Talos in full violation of the White Gold concordant with the Aldmeri Dominion, which recognizes the Elven belief that Talos, as a human, cannot be one of the divines. In jeopardizing the treaty that so many sacrificed for during the Great War, the Empire was wrong. But what choice did they have, I ask you, against the Bear of Markarth, Ulfric Stormcloak? No, is not an answer. Interesting. So this is the perspective of the Empire. I wonder if there's any book that has the perspective of the Stormcloaks about this. It would be really interesting to read that. Because I know that it's very biased, the vision that they both have of each other. It's like you can never have all the information. Maybe when we get to Markarth, because I haven't gone there yet. Even if we go to Markarth, maybe we'll find some more information about that event. Cabin in the Wood. This is volume 2. Why? What do you mean volume 2? It doesn't say volume 2. Why? Oh no. Does that mean... Wait. Did I miss a book? Because there were a few more Cabin in the Woods. I didn't realize that could be like a volume 1. Okay. I'll try to see afterwards to see if that... Everything that has like a volume 2, volume 3, or chapter something is... I prefer to leave it for reading all on one. Okay, so what was this? The Great War. Okay. A concise account of the Great War between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion by Legate Justanus Kindius? I'll just note, much of what is written in this book is pieced together from documents captured from the enemy during the war, interrogation of prisoners and eyewitnesses, accounts from surviving soldiers and imperial officers. I myself commanded the 10th Legion in Hammerfell and Cyrodiil until I was wounded in the year 175 during the assault of the imperial city. That said, the full truth of some events may never be known. I have done my best to fill in the gaps with educated conjectures based on my experience as well as my hard-earned knowledge of the enemy. The Rise of the Talmor. Although it is not well known, Somerset Isle suffered from the Oblivion Crisis as much as Cyrodiil did. The elves made war upon Oblivion invaders, occasionally even crossing over to close down Oblivion gates. As a nation, they had more success than Cyrodiil did. Okay. Although the limitless Daedric hordes made the outcome a foregone conclusion, the Thalmor had always been a powerful faction within Somerset Isle, but had also always been a minority voice. During the crisis, the Crystal Tower was forced to give the Thalmor greater power and authority. Their efforts almost certainly saved Somerset Isle from being overrun. They capitalized on their success to seize a total control in the 4th Era, year 22. Okay, they renamed the nation Alinor, which harkens back to an earlier age before the ascendancy of man. Most people outside of the Aldmeri Dominion still call it Somerset Isle, either out of peevishness or ignorance. In 4th Era, year 29, the government of Valenwood was overthrown by Thalmor collaborators and a union with Alinor proclaimed. It appears that Thalmoratians had formed close ties to certain Bosmeri factions even before the Oblivion Crisis. The Empire and its Bosmer allies, caught completely off guard, were quickly defeated by the much better prepared Altmer forces that invaded Valenwood on the heels of the coup. Thus was the Aldmeri Dominion reborn. Shortly afterwards, the Aldmeri Dominion severed all contact with the Empire. For 70 years they were silent. Most scholars believe there was some sort of internal strife in Alinor, but very little is known of the factional struggles that went on inside the Dominion while the Thalmor consolidated this power in Somerset and Valenwood. In the 4th Era, year 98, the two moons, Master and Secunda, vanished. Within most of the Empire, this was viewed with trepidation and fear. In elsewhere, it was far worse. Culturally, the moons are much more influential to the Khajiit. After 2 years of the Void Nights, the moons returned. The Thalmor announced that they had restored the moons using previously unknown dawn magics, but it isn't clear if they truly restored the moons or just took advantage of foreknowledge that they would return. Regardless of the truth of the matter, the Khajiit credited the Thalmor as their saviors. Within 50 years, imperial influence in elsewhere had also diminished, that the Empire was unable to respond effectively to the coup of 4th Era at year 115, which dissolved the Elsewhere Confederacy and recreated the ancient kingdoms of Anekina and Peletine as client states of the Aldmeri Dominion. Once more, the Empire failed to stop the advance of the Thalmor power. When Titus Mede II ascended the throne in the 4th Era, year 168, he inherited a weakened empire. The glory days of the Septims were distant memory. Valenwood and elsewhere were gone, ceded to the Thalmor enemy. Black Marsh had been lost to imperial rule since the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis. Morrowind had never recovered fully from the eruption of Mount Vvardenfell. Hammerfell was plagued by infighting between crowns and forebears. Only High Rock, Cyrodiil, and Skyrim remained prosperous and peaceful. Emperor Titus Mede had only a few short years to consolidate his rule before his leadership was put to the ultimate test. The war begins. On the 30th of Frostfall, 4th Era, year 171, the Aldmeri Dominion sent an ambassador to the Imperial City with a gift in a covered card and an ultimatum for the new emperor. The long list of demands included staggering tributes, disbandment of the Blades, outlawing the worship of Talos, and ceding large sections of Hammerfell to the Dominion. Despite the warnings of his generals of the Empire's military weakness, Emperor Titus Mede II rejected the ultimatum. The Thalmor ambassador opened the cart, spilling over 100 heads on the floor. Every Blades ancient in Somerset and Valenwood, and so began the Great War, which would consumed the Empire and the Aldmeri dominion for the next 5 years. Within days, Aldmeri armies invaded Hammerfell and Cyrodiil simultaneously. A strong force commanded by the Thalmor General Lord Narifin attacked Cyrodiil from the south, marching out of hidden camps in northern Elsewhere and flanking the Imperial defenses along the Valenwood border. Leyawiin soon fell into the invaders, but Bravil was cut off and besieged. At the same time, an Aldmeri army under Lady Aranelia crossed into western Cyrodiil from Valenwood, bypassing Anvil and Kvatch and crossing into Hammerfell. Smaller Aldmeri forces landed along the south coastline of Hammerfell. These united Redguard's forces offered only scattered resistance to the invaders, and much of the southern coastline was quickly overrun. The greatly outnumbered Imperial legions retreated across the Alikir's desert and the now famous March of Thirst. Fourth Era, year 172 to 173. The Aldmeri advanced into Cyrodiil. It appears now that the initial Aldmeri objective was in fact the conquest of Hammerfell, and that the invasion of Cyrodiil was intended only to pin down the Imperial legions while Hammerfell was overrun. However, the surprising initial success of Lord Narifin's attack led the Thalmor to believe that the Empire was weaker than they had thought. The capture of the Imperial City itself and the complete overthrow of the Empire thus became their primary objective on the next 2 years. As we know, the Thalmor nearly achieved their objective. It was only because of our Emperor's determined leadership during the Empire's darkest hour that this disaster was averted. During the Fourth Era, year 172, the Aldmeri advanced deeper into Cyrodiil. Bravil and Anvil both fell to the invaders. Those are the ports, right? I think Anvil is one port city or something. It's on the border. On the border of Cyrodiil, I think. By the end of the year, North Narifin had advanced to the very walls of the Imperial City. There were fierce naval clashes in Lake Rumare and along the Niven as the Imperial forces attempted to hold the eastern bank. In Hammerfell, the Thalmor were content to consolidate their gains as they took control of the whole southern coastline, which was in fact their stated objective in the ultimatum delivered to the Emperor. Of the southern cities, only Hegaith still held out. The survivors of the March of Thirst regrouped in northern Hammerfell, joined by reinforcement from High Rock. The year 4th Era 173 saw stiffening Imperial resistance in Cyrodiil, but the seemingly inexorable Aldmeri advance continued. Fresh legions from Skyrim bolstered the Emperor's main army in the Imperial City, but the Aldmeri forced the crossing of the Niven and began advancing in force up the eastern bank. By the end of the year, the Imperial City was surrounded on 3 sides. Only the northern supply route to Bruma remained open. In Hammerfell, Imperial fortunes took a turn for the better. In early 4th Era, 173, a forebear army from the Sentinel broke the siege of Hegathe, a crown city, leading to the reconciliation of the two factions. Despite this, Lady Aranelia's main army succeeded in crossing the Alikir's desert. The Imperial legions under General Decianus met them outside Skaven in a bloody and indecisive clash. Decianus withdrew and left Aranelia in possession of Skaven, but the Aldmeri were too weakened to continue their advance. 4th Era, year 174, the sack of the Imperial City. The Thalmor leadership committed all available forces to the campaign in Cyrodiil, gambling on a decisive victory to end the war once and for all. During the spring, Aldmeri reinforcements gathered in the southern Cyrodiil, and the 12th of Second Seed they launched a massive assault on the imperial city itself. One army drove north to completely surround the city, while North Narifin's main force attacked the walls from the south, east, and west. The emperor's decision to fight his way out of the city rather than make a last stand was a bold one. No general dared advise him to abandon the capital, but Titus II was proven right in the end. While the 8th Legion fought a desperate and doomed rearguard action on the walls of the city, Titus II broke out of the city to the north of his main army, smashing through the surroundings of the Almeri forces and linking up with reinforcements marching south from Skyrim under General Jonah. Meanwhile, however, the capital fell to some invaders and the infamous sack of the imperial city began. The imperial palace was burned, the white gold tower itself looted, and all manner of atrocities carried out by the vengeful elves on the innocent populace. In Hammerfell, General Decianus was preparing to drive the Almeri back from Skaven when he was ordered to march for Cyrodiil. Unwilling to abandon Hammerfell completely, he allowed a great number of invalids to be discharged from the Legion before they marched east. These veterans formed the core of the army that eventually drove Lady Aranelia's force back across the Alikir Slade in year 174, taking heavy losses on their retreat from harassing attacks by the Alikir's warriors. And it keeps going. Wow, this is really long. Okay. 4th Era, year 175, the Battle of the Red King. During the winter of year 74 to 175, the Thalmor seemed to have believed that the war in Cyrodiil was all but over. They made several attempts to negotiate with Titus II. The emperor encouraged them in their belief that he was preparing to surrender. Meanwhile, he gathered his forces to retake the imperial city. In what is now known as the Battle of the Red King, a battle that will serve as a model for imperial strategists for generations to come, Titus II divided his forces into three. One army, with the legions from Hammerfell under the General Decianus, was hidden in the Colovian highlands near Corel. The Almeri were unaware that he was no longer in Hammerfell, possibly because the imperial veterans Decianus had left behind led Lady Aranelia to believe that she still faced an imperial army. The second army, largely of North legions under General Jonah, took up position near Shadenhall. The main army was commanded by the emperor himself and would undertake the main assault of the imperial city from the north. On the 30th of Rain's Hand, the bloody battle of the Red King began as General Decianus swept down on the city from the west, while General Jonah's legionaries drove south along the Red King's Road. In a two-day assault, Jonah's army crossed the Niven and advanced west, attempting to link up with Decianus' legions and thus surround the imperial city. Lord Narifin was taken by surprise by Decianus' assault, but Jonah's troops faced bitter resistance as the Almeri counterattacked from Bravel and Skingrad. The heroic North legionaries held firm, however, beating off the piecemeal Almeri attacks. By the 5th day of the battle, the Almeri army in the imperial city was surrounded. Titus II led the assault from the north, personally capturing Lord Narifin. There we go. It is rumored the emperor wielded the famed sword Goldbrand, although this has never been officially confirmed by the imperial government. An attempt by the Almeri to break out of the city to the south was blocked by the unbreakable shield wall of General Jonah's battered legions. In the end, the main Almeri army in Cyrodiil was completely destroyed. The emperor's decision to withdraw from the imperial city in the 4th Era, year 174, was bloodily vindicated. Lord Narifin was kept alive for 33 days, hanging from the White Gold Tower. It is not recorded where his body was buried, if it was buried at all. One source claims he was carried off by a winged tetra on the 34th day. The White Gold Concordant of the end of the war. Okay, although victorious, the Imperial armies were no shape to continue the war. The entire remaining Imperial force was gathered in Cyrodiil, exhausted and decimated by the Battle of the Red King. Not a single legion had more than half its soldiers fit for duty. 2 legions had been effectively annihilated, not counting the loss of the 8 during the retreat from the Imperial city the previous year. Titus II knew that there would be no better time to negotiate peace, and late in the 4th era, year 175, the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion signed the White Gold Concordant, ending the Great War. The terms were harsh, but Titus II believed that it was necessary to secure peace and give the Empire a chance to regain its strength. The 2 most controversial terms of the Concordant were the banning of the worship of Talos and the cession of a large section of the southern Hammerfell, most of what was already occupied by the Aldmeri forces. Critics have pointed out that the Concordant is almost identical to the ultimatum the Emperor rejected 5 years earlier. However, there is a great difference between agreeing to such terms under the mere threat of war and agreeing to them at the end of a long and destructive war. No part of the Empire would have accepted these terms in 4th era, year 171, dictated by the Thalmor at Swords Point. Titus II would have faced civil war. By 4th era, year 175, most of the Empire welcomed peace at almost any price. Epilogue. Hammerfell fights on alone. Hammerfell, however, refused to accept the White Gold Concordant. Being unwilling to concede defeat and the loss of so much of their territory, Titus II was forced to officially renounce Hammerfell as an imperial province in order to preserve the hard-won peace treaty. The Red Guards, understandably, looked on this as a betrayal. In this, the Thalmor certainly achieved one of their long-term goals by sowing lasting bitterness between Hammerfell and the Empire. In the end, the heroic Red Guards fought the Aldmeri Dominion to a standstill, although the war lasted for 5 more years and left southern Hammerfell devastated. The Red Guards said that this proved that the White Gold Concordant was unnecessary and that if Titus II had kept his nerve, the Aldmeri would have been truly defeated by the combined forces of Hammerfell and the rest of the Empire. The truth of that assertion can, of course, never be known, but the Red Guards should not forget the great sacrifice of imperial blood, Breton, North, and Cyrodiilic at the Battle of the Red King that weakened the Dominion enough to allow the eventual Second Treaty of Stros-M'Kai in 4th era, year 180, and the withdrawal of the Aldmeri forces from Hammerfell. There can be no doubt that the current peace cannot last forever. The Thalmor take the long view, as is proved by the sequence of events leading up to the Great War. All those who value freedom over tyranny can only hope that before it is too late, Hammerfell and the Empire will be reconciled and stand united against the Thalmor threat. Otherwise, any hope to stem the tide of the Thalmor ruled over all of Tamriel is dimmed. That was a long book. It was super interesting. I don't think I have received that much information about the politics of Tamriel. God, that was a really good book. I like that. I enjoy shorter books and stuff, but these long books about history are really good. Okay, so The Legend of the Red Eagle by Dren, Archivist of Winterhold. Did I read something else about the Archivist of Winterhold? That name rings a bell, but I don't know from where. This tale was transcribed from a memory of Clarisse Bain, student of Winterhold. Events of the legend suggest a date See? What's that? C point? What does that mean? First era 2030? 2030. Year 2030, okay. Though as with any oral tradition, much of it is likely a later anachronism. Curiously, stories of a similar king and his legendary blade appear in other ancient myths of the Reach. Long ago, a child was born in the Sundered Hills. They named him Faulan, which means red eagle, in the tongue of the Reach, for the screeching bird call that greeted his birth and the crimson blooms on the autumn hills. Thus began his legend, Reach child, born under auspicious skies, his very name the color of blood. 10 kings ruled the Reach in those days, and though men were free, the people were scattered and warred amongst themselves. The augurs foresaw the boy's destiny, a warrior without peer, first and foremost, Lord of the Reach, chosen to unite all under his name. Faulan grew in years and strength, and it seemed the prophecy would be fulfilled. The banner of the Red Eagle was raised along the cliff of the Reach, and his people prospered. Then came Hestra, Empress of the South, riding to war. One by one the kings stood before her. One by one they fell aside, bending knee in imperial bargains or slaughter in the battlefield. Her legions came at last to the Sundered Hills, and envoys were sent to bargain for their surrender. Faulan refused to yield the freedom of his people, but the elders were afraid, cast him out, and accepted the imperial yoke. Thus was stolen by the foreign invaders his land, his people, his very name. In the years that followed, Red Eagle became known as the untamed spirit of the Reach, unbowed, unbroken, stained by the blood of his foes. He gathered loyal Reachmen to himself, those who clung to the old ways, who yearned for freedom and forged a new nation. Together they fell upon the occupiers and traitors by night, disappearing into the cliffs and caves each morn, evading capture. It was not enough. For every imperial patrol and garrison they wiped out, yet more seemed to march from the green south to replace them. One night, under a cloud-choked sky, the men of the Red Eagle warmed themselves over damp fires of smoldering moss. A huddled, shambling figure came to them, cloaked in rags, face cowled. Though his men mocked and cast stones at the stranger, Faulan sensed something and beckoned. The cowl was thrown back in the dim light, and she revealed herself to be one of the ancient and venerable hag-ravens. She offered power for a price, and a pact was made. Thus was brokered to the witch his heart, his will, his humanity. From that day forth, his was the spirit of vengeance, pitiless and beyond remorse. The rebels grew in strength and number, and none would stand against them. Faulan's eyes burned coldly in those days, black opals reflecting a mind not entirely of his own. 2 years passed, and the foreigners were all but driven from the Reach. Such peace could not last, however, and a great host fell upon them, a swift army of invaders unlike any before. For a fortnight, Hestra's generals laid siege to Red Eagle's stronghold, till he himself came forth for battle, alone and robed in nothing but his righteous fury. 1,000 foreigners fell before his flaming sword, and the enemy was routed. Yet, when night fell, so too did he. The warriors who came to him said Faulan's eyes were clear again on that final night. He was taken to the place prepared for him, a tomb hidden deep within the rock. With his remaining strength, he presented his sword to his people and swore an oath. Fight on, and when at least the Reach is free, his blade should be returned, that he may rise and lead them again. Thus was given for his people, his life, his dream, his sword. But when every debt is repaid in blood, these he shall reclaim once more. Really good, I love that. Was really interesting. The Monomyth. What is this? In Mundus, conflict and disparity of what are what bring change, and change is the most sacred of the 11 forces. Change is the force without focus of or origin. Oegrinthir, Variate, order of the Psychics, I suppose. P.S. JJJJ. Okay, I haven't read that. Okay, so simply put, the schism in the human Altmeri worldview is that mortals' relationship to the divine. Humans take the humble path that they were created by the immortal forces, while the Altmer claim descent from them. It doesn't seem like much, but it is a distinction that colors the rest of their divergent mythologies. All Tamrielic regions begin the same, man or mare. Things begin with the dualism of Anu and his other. These twin forces go by many names: Anu Padome, Anuiel Sithis, Ak-El, Satak Akel, is not. Anuiel is the everlasting ineffable light. Sithis is the corrupting inexpressible action. In the middle is the grey maybe, Nirn. In the Elnofex. In most cultures, Anuiel is honored for his part of the interplay that creates the world, but Sithis is held in highest esteem because he is the one that causes the reaction. Sithis is thus the original creator, an entity who intrinsically causes change without design. Even the Hist acknowledge this being. Okay? Anuiel is also perceived of as order, opposed to the Sithis chaos. Perhaps it is easier for mortals to envision change than perfect stasis. Oh God. Perfect stasis. Often Anuiel is relegated to the mythic background of Sithis fancies. In Yokudan folk tales, which are among the most vivid in the world, Satak is only referred to a handful of times as the Hum. He is a force so prevalent as to be not really there at all. In any case, from these two beings springs of Et Ada, or original spirits, to humans, or original spirit. To humans, these Et Ada are the gods and demons. To the Altmer, the Edra and Edra, or the ancestors. All of the Tamrielic pantheons fill their roosters from this Et Ada through divine membership. No, wait. All of the Tamrielic pantheons fill their roosters from this Et Ada, though divine membership often differs from culture to culture, like Anu and Padome. Though every one of these pantheons contains the archetypes of the dragon god and the missing god, the dragon god and the... Okay, that's a title. The dragon god and the missing god. The dragon god is always related to time, and it is universally revered as the first god. He is often called Akatosh, whose perch from eternity allowed the day. He is the central god of the Cyrodiilic Empire. That's Akatosh. Okay. The missing god is always related to the mortal plane, and it is a key figure in the human Altmeri's schism. The missing refers to either his palpable absence from the pantheon, another mental distress that is interpreted as in a variety of ways, or the removal of his divine spark by other immortals. He is of the cult Lorcan, and his epitaphs are many, equally damnable and devout. Note that Tamriel and the mortal plane do not exist yet. The great maybe is still the playground of the original spirits. Some are more bound to Anu's lights, others to the unknowable void. Wow. Their constant flux and interplay increase their number, and their personalities take long to congeal. When Akatosh forms, time begins, and it becomes easier for some spirits to realize themselves as beings with a past and a future. The strongest of the recognizable spirits crystallize: Mephala, Arche, Jifre, Magnus. Is that an R or a K? Rupta? Let's suppose it's an R. I don't know. Others remained as concepts, ideas, or emotions. One of the strongest of these is a barely formed urge that the others call Lorcan, details a plan to create Mundus, the mortal plane. Humans, with the exception of the Red Guards, it is an R. I was looking for like the little capital letters on the page and I didn't find it, but it is an R. I get so confused with this font. Okay, so humans, with the exception of the Red Guards, see this as an act of divine mercy, an enlightenment here whereby lesser creatures can reach immortality. Aldmer, with the exception of the Dark Elves, see this act as a cruel deception, a trick that sunder the connection to the spirit plane. The myth of Aruvis. Subtitle: The Psychic's Compensation. Mythic Aruvis was an attempt by Artem apologists to explain the basics of Aldmeri relation to Uriel V in the early glorious parts of his reign. It quietly avoided any blame or bias against the Lorcan concept, which was still held in esteem by the Cyrodiils as Rezar, the missing siblings of the divines. Despite this, the Psychici still give a nice summary of the elder view, and it will serve our purposes here. This version comes from the archives of the Imperial Seminary from the handwritten notes of an unknown scribe. Mythic Aruvis exists, and has existed from a time without measure, as a fanciful and natural realm. Aruvis is used to connote the imperceptible penumbra, the grey center between the is not of Anu and Padome. It contains the multitude realms of our Aetherius and Oblivion, as well as other, less structured forms. The magical beings of the mythic Aruvis live for a long time and have complex narrative lives, creating the patterns of myth. These are spirits made from bits of the immortal polarity. The first of these was Akatosh, the time dragon, whose formation made it easier for other spirits to structure themselves. Gods and demons form and reform and procreate. Finally, the magical beings of mythic Aruvis told the ultimate story, that of their own death. For some, this was an artistic transfiguration into the concrete, non-magical substance of the world. For others, this was a war in which all were slain, their bodies becoming the substance of the world. For yet others, this was a romantic marriage and parenthood, with the parents' spirits naturally having to die and give way to the succeeding mortal races. The agent of this communal decision was Lorcan, whom most early myths vilify as a trickster or deceiver. More sympathetic versions of the story point at Lorcan as being the reason the mortal plane exists at all. The magical beings created the races of the mortal Aruvis in their own image, either consciously as artists and craftsmen, or as the fecund, rotting matter out of which the mortals sprung forth, or in a variety of other analogical senses. The magical beings then, having died, became the Et Ada. The Et Ada are the things perceived by and revered by the mortals as gods, spirits, or geniuses of Aruvis. Through their deaths, these magical beings separated themselves in nature of the other magical beings of the unnatural realms. No, don't do that. The Dedra were created at this time also, being spirits of gods more attuned to oblivion, or that realm closer to the void of Padome. This act is the dawn of the mythic malefic era. It has been perceived by the earliest mortals many different ways, either as joyous second creation or especially by the elves, as a painful fracturing from the divine. The originator of the event is always Lorcan. So, Lorcan, this creator, trickster, tester, deity is in every Tamrielic mythic tradition. His most popular name is the Aldmeri Lorcan, or Doom Drum. He convinced or contrived the original spirits to bring about the creation of the mortal plane, upsetting the status quo, much like his father Padome had introduced instability into the universe in the beginning place. After the world is materialized, Lorcan is separated from his divine center, sometimes involuntarily, and wonders the creation of the Et Ada interpretations of the Et Ada. Interpretations of these events differ widely by culture. Below are some of the better known. Yokudan Satakal the Worldkin. Satak was first serpent, the snake who came before, and all the worlds to come. Wait, what? Satak was first serpent, the snake who came before, and all the worlds to come rested in the glimmer of its scales. But it was so big that there was nothing but, and thus it was coiled around and around itself, and the worlds to come slid across each other, but none had room to breathe or even be, and so the worlds called to something to save them, to let them out. But of course, there was nothing outside the first serpent, so aid had to come from inside it. This was Akel, the hungry stomach. Akel made itself known, and Satak could only think about what it was, and it was the best hunger, so it ate and ate. Soon there was enough room to live in the worlds of things began. These things were new, and they often made mistakes, for there was hardly time to practice being things before. So most things ended quickly, or were not good, or gave up on themselves. Some things were about to start, but they were eaten up as attack got to that part of the body. This was a violent time. Pretty soon, Akel caused Satak to bite his own heart, and that was the end. The hunger, though, refused to stop, even in death, and so the first serpent shed its skin to begin anew. As the old world died, Satakal began, and when things realized this pattern, so did they realize their part in it, what the part in it was. They began to take names like Rupka or Tuwaka, and they strode about looking for their kin. As Satakal ate itself over and over, the strongest spirits learned to bypass the cycle by moving at strange angles. They call this process the walkabout, a way of striving between the world skins. Rupka was so big that he was able to place the stars in the sky so that weaker spirits might find their way easier. This practice became so easy for the spirits that they became a place called the Far Shores, a time of waiting until the next kin. Rupka was able to sire many children through the cycles, so he became known as the Tall Papa. He continued to place stars to map out the void of others, but after so many cycles, there were almost too many spirits to help out. He made himself a helper from the detritus of past skins, and this was Sep, or Second Serpent. Sep had much of the hungry stomach still left in him, multiple hungers from multiple skins. He was so hungry he could not think straight. Sometimes he would just eat the spirits he was supposed to help, but Tall Papa would always reach in and take them back. Finally, tired of helping Tall Papa, Sep went and gathered the rest of the old skins and balled them up, tricking the spirits to help him, promising them this was how he reached the new world, by making one out of the old. These spirits loved this way of living, as it was easier, no more jumping from place to place. Many spirits joined in, believing this was good thinking. Tall Papa just shook his head. Pretty soon the spirits on the skin balls started to die, because they were very far from the real world of Satakal, and they found that it was too far to jump into the far shores now. The spirits that were left pleaded with Tall Papa to take them back, but Grim Rutka would not, and he told the spirits that they must learn new ways to follow the stars to the far shores now. If they could not, then they must live on through their children, which was not the same as before. Sepp, however, needed more punishment, and so told Papa squashed the snake with a big stick. The hunger fell out of Sepp's dead mouth, and was the only thing left of the second serpent, while the rest of the new world was allowed to strive back to godhood. Sepp could only slink around in a dead skin, or swim about the sky, a hungry boy that jealously tried to eat the stars. Oh god, it continues. Honestly, I don't know what I'm reading, but I'm enjoying myself. I absorbed none of that knowledge because I don't know, I didn't get it. I think I didn't get it. Okay. These are long books. Come on. This was, Cyrodiilic Shazar's song. This was a new thing the Shazars described to the gods. Becoming mothers and fathers, being responsible and making great sacrifices with no guarantee of success. But Shazar spoke beautifully to them and moved them beyond mystery and tears. Thus the Aedra gave free birth to the world and beasts and the beings, making these things from parts of themselves. This free birth was very painful, and afterwards the Aedra were no longer young and strong and powerful as they had been for the beginning of days. Some Aedra were disappointed and bitter in their loss and angry with Shazar and with all creation, for they felt Shazar had lied and tricked them. These Aedra and gods of the Altmer, led by Auriel, were disgusted by their enfeebled selves and by what they had created. Everything is spoiled for now, for all time, and the most we can do is teach the elven races to suffer nobly, with dignity, and chastise ourselves for our folly, and avenge ourselves upon Shazar and his allies. Thus are the gods of the elves dark and brooding, and thus are the elves ever dissatisfied with mortality, and always proud and stoic, despite the harshness of this cruel and indifferent world. Other Aedra looked upon creation and were well pleased. These Aedra, the gods of men and beast folk, led by Akatosh, praised and cherished their words, the mortal races. We have suffered and are diminished for all time, but the mortal world we have made is glorious, filling our hearts and spirits with hope. Let us teach the mortal races to live well and cherish beauty and honor, and to love one another as we love them. Thus are the gods of men tender and patient, and thus are men and beast folk, great in heart of joy or suffering, and ambitious for greater wisdom and a better world. Now, when the Daedra lords heard Shazar, they mocked him and the other Aedra, cut parts of ourselves off, and lose them forever? That's stupid. You'll be sorry. We are far smarter than you, for we will create a new world out of ourselves. But we will not cut it off or let it mock us, but we will make this world with ourselves, forever ours, and under our complete control. So, the Daedra lords created the Daedric realms, and all of the ranks of the lesser Daedra, great and small. And for the most part, the Daedra lords were well pleased with this arrangement, for they always had worshippers and servants and playthings close to hand, but at the same time they sometimes looked with envy upon the mortal realms, for their own mortals were foul and feeble and contemptible. Their passions and ambitions were also far more surprising and entertaining than the antics of the lesser Daedra. Thus do the Daedra lords court and seduce certain amusing specimens of the mortal races, especially the passionate and powerful. It gives the Daedra lords special pleasure to steal away the Shazar and the Aedra, the greatest and most ambitious mortals. Not only are you fools to mutilate yourselves, gloated the Daedra lords, but you cannot even keep the best pieces, which prefer the glory and power of Daedra lords to the feeble vulgarity of the mush-minded Aedra. Altmer, the heart of the world. Anu encompassed and encompasses all things, so that he might know himself, and created Anuiel, his soul, and the soul of all things. Anuiel, as all souls, was given to self-reflection, and for this he needed to differentiate between his forms, attributes, and intellect. Thus was born Sithis, who was the sum of all limitations Anuel would utilize to ponder himself. Anuel, who was the soul of all things, therefore became many things, and this interplay was Anis, the Arubis. At first the Arubis was turbulent and confusing as Anuel's ruminations went on without design. Aspects of the Arubis, wow, I've been reading that wrong. Aurbis, okay. Aspect of the Aurbis then asked for a schedule to follow or procedures whereby they might enjoy themselves a little longer outside the perfect knowledge, so that he might know himself this way too. Anu created Auriel, the soul of his soul. Auriel bled through the Aurbis. Auriel bled through the Aurbis as a new force called time. With time, various aspects of the Aurbis began to understand their natures and limitations. They took names like Magnus or Mara or Sen. One of these, Lorcan, was more of a limit than a nature, so he could never last long anywhere. As he entered every aspect of Anuel, Lorcan would plant an idea that was almost wholly based on limitation. He outlined a plan to create a soul for the Aurbis, a place where the aspect of aspects might even be allowed to self-reflect. He gained many followers, even Auriel, when told he would become king of the new world, agreed to help Lorcan. So they created the Mundus, where their own aspects might live and become the Et Ada. But this was a trick. As Lorcan knew, this world contained more limitations than not, and was therefore hardly a thing of Anu at all. Mundus was the house of the Sithis. As their aspects began to die off, many of the Et Ada vanished completely. Some escaped, like Magnus, and that was why there was no limitations to magic. Others, like Yfre, transformed themselves into the Elnofe, the Earthbones, so that the whole world might not die. Some had to marry and make children just to last. Each generation was weaker than the last, and soon there were Aldmer. Darkness caved in. Lorcan made armies out of the weakest souls and named them men, and then brought cities into every quarter. Auriel pleaded with Anu to take them back, but he had already filled the places with something else. But his soul was gentler, and granted Auriel his bow and shield, so that he might save the Aldmer for the hordes of men. Some had already fallen, like the Chimer, who listened to Tainted Et Ada, and others, like the Bosmer, had soiled time's line by making mannish wives. Auriel could not save Aldmora, the Elderwood, and he was lost to men. They were chased south and east to old Elnofe, and Lorcan was close behind. He shattered the land into many. Finally, Trinimac, Auriel's greatest knight, knocked Lorcan down in front of his army and reached in with more than hands to take his heart. He was undone. The men dragged Lorcan's body away and swore blood vengeance on the heirs of Auriel for all time. But when Trinimac and Auriel tried to destroy the heart of Lorcan, it laughed at them. It said, "This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other." So Auriel fastened the thing to an arrow and let it fly long into the sea, where no aspect of the new world may ever find it. That was a read. I was not expecting it to be so long. Half of the time I didn't know what he was talking about, but honestly, it was a really good read. I enjoyed that. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. Poison Song. I'm not much of it. This one has a lot of stuff. The Ullamatter, Wolfwing, 2 and 6. The Woodcutter's Wife. There's 3 of them. I can do it. This is going to be like 2 hours long, but I'm going to do it. What do you mean, volume 1? What do you mean, Volume 1? Okay, let's just read it. Who cares? The Woodcutter's Wife, Volume 1, as told by Mugen, son of Molag. Son of Molag? Okay. Legend tells of a woodcutter who built a shack deep within the pine forest. There, he hoped to live in peace with his family. The woodcutter's family lived well for a time, but without warning, the weather turned bitterly cold and spoiled the harvest. Before long, with their meager supply of food all but gone, the family was starving. Late one snowy night, a traveler knocked on the cabin door seeking shelter from the biting cold. Always generous of heart, the woodcutter welcomed the stranger into his home, apologized that he had no food to offer. With a smile, the traveler cast off his cloak to reveal the garments of a mage. As the woodcutter and his family looked on, the mysterious visitor reached into his satchel and withdrew a scroll tied with a silver ribbon. No sooner had the wizard unfurled the scroll and read the words aloud when a great feast appeared from out of thin air. That night, nobody in the woodcutter's cabin went hungry. Day by day, the snow piled up. Every night, the maid produced another scroll from his bag and read the words, each time summoning a new feast. On the 5th night, the woodcutter's wife awoke her husband to confess her mistrust of their magical guest. Surely, she argued, there was some price to pay for the magical feast that everyone enjoyed night after night. The woodcutter would have none of it. After nearly dying from the lack of food, his family was eating well. The divines had sent them a gift, he explained, and he was foolish to question their wisdom. But the woodcutter's wife would not be persuaded. Every night she grew more fearful and more desperate. She was certain that the family had entered into a devil's bargain, and the time would soon come when the mage would ask for something unspeakable in return for the gift. While everyone in the cabin slept, the woodcutter's wife snuck out of bed and took her husband's axe in hand. She crept into the traveler's room and with one swing looped off his head. Suddenly the wizard's disembodied head awoke. His eyes opened wide, and when he beheld his main body, he let forth a terrible cry. Awakened by the horrified scream, the woodcutter and his children rushed into the room, gasped at the terrible sight of the decapitated mage. With his last gasp of breath, the traveler laid a fearful curse on the woodcutter's wife. After her mortal death, she was damned to rise once again and walk the woods alone, only to burn at the rising of the sun. To this day, those who walk the pine forest late at night tell tales of a weeping woman glimpsed between the trees. She carries a bloody axe, the stories say. It is terrifying to behold. So he was actually a good person and she was being paranoid? Could be.